In this video, I will be talking about how to format your paper. First, let's start off with the introduction. All right. So your introductory paragraph should be about half a page to 3/4 of a page long. You don't want to overdo it and put too much into the introduction, or you don't want it to be too short either. So what do you put in your introduction? So you want to have some historical background, and historical background just about 2 to 3 sentences roughly. And you want to make sure that this historical background is significant. It's relevant to what your topic is. So say, for example, if you are writing about the downfall of the Roman Empire, you want to give some historical background that's relevant to that time period when the Roman Empire was going into decline. Right? You wouldn't want to give historical background about the beginning of the Roman Empire or something random like, I don't know, prostitution in the Roman Empire. You know what I mean? Like, you want your historical background to be specifically on or around the topic that you are going to be writing on for the rest of the paper. Okay, so the reason why you're giving historical background is to let your reader know a little bit more about the topic. So say if I'm reading your paper and if I don't know anything about the Roman Empire and its downfall, well then I want to know a little bit about what was going on around that time. Like, what's the background story? What's happening at that time that the downfall is occurring. So that's why you're giving some historical background. And just real brief, just 2 to 3 sentences. Okay, so what else is going in your introductory paragraph? Your main claims. Okay, your main overarching claims. You should have about 3 main claims that you're going to be making in your paper. All right, and those main claims may have a number of subclaims under them, right? So, like, for example, you may have one main claim, and for that main claim, to prove that claim, you may have 3, 4, 5 paragraphs that have subclaims in them that all work towards proving one of your main claims. All right. So you want to briefly just state your 3 main claims in your introductory paragraph, right? So you don't want to go too in depth in them. You're going to do that in the body paragraphs. You also want to include your historical question. All right, I want you to actually put the question itself in the introductory paragraph so we know the question that you're going to be answering in this paper. And then you want to include your thesis, and the thesis is basically your argument. It is your answer to that historical question. All right. So, for example, back to the example of the Roman Empire, say my question was, what were the factors that brought about the downfall of the Roman Empire? Say that's my historical question, and I want to find out the answer to that question. Well, I will give you my thesis, and my thesis is my answer to that question. And the thesis follows the format of making an assertion and then giving 3 supporting reasons that prove that assertion. Okay, I give a separate example here, as if I was writing a paper on Facebook, and so I give an example on that. So I have my assertion: Facebook takes away the privacy of its users in multiple ways. That's my assertion. That's what I'm trying to prove. And then I have 3 supporting reasons that support that assertion, right? Including the selling of their information to third-party companies. That's 1. Comma, allowing government agencies to view their profiles. There's 2. And allowing the public to see portions of their information. That's 3. So that's my 3 supporting reasons that prove my assertion that Facebook is taking away the privacy of its users in multiple ways. All right. Moving on. So after the introduction, you're going to have your body paragraphs. So you'll have a number of different body paragraphs, and the point of each body paragraph is to prove one specific claim. All right. I mentioned earlier that you will have 3 main claims, right? Well, those 3 main claims are all going to have subclaims underneath them. All right, so one of my main claims may have 4 different subclaims that work together to prove that larger main claim. So all of your body paragraphs in your paper are all trying to prove one of your subclaims, right? And your subclaims are working together to prove one of your main claims, right? All right, so with the body paragraphs, this is the format that I would like you to follow. All right, you'll have your topic sentence. Let's start with that. The topic sentence is the first sentence of your body paragraphs, and basically it's introducing the topic of that paragraph to the reader. Now, in your topic sentence, I want you to state your claim, to clearly and specifically, all right, I'm emphasizing those words, clearly and specifically stating the claim that you are going to be proving in that body paragraph. All right, and so you'll state your claim, one claim only, You know, don't put 2 or 3 in there. I know it's tempting, right? We want to load it up with a bunch of claims, but we're just going to be focusing on one claim at a time per body paragraph. All right, and so you state one claim that you're going to be proving in that paragraph. When you state the claim, make sure that it specifically tells the reader what you will be arguing. You don't want to be too broad with it. Sometimes it could be a little vague, and I'm not sure, specifically what you're going to be arguing there. So be as specific as possible. So you want to, so that's what I mean down here when I say avoid being too vague or too broad. Okay. All right, so that's your first sentence of each of your body paragraphs is going to be stating a claim. If your first sentence is not stating a claim, then you got to go back and make sure that it is. All right. So many times I read, papers like that where it's the first sentence is not really telling the reader what you're going to be trying to what you're going to be trying to prove in that body paragraph, and so the body paragraph becomes kind of like a little confusing. You don't know what the point is of it. What's the topic of it? And so that's the whole point of having a topic sentence, to direct the reader so that they know, oh, okay, they're going to be trying to prove this point in this paragraph. All right. Okay, so after you do the first sentence, the topic sentence, then you're going to start introducing your evidence. And your evidence is what you get from your research, from your sources. Okay, and so you will be using your sources to provide evidence that proves the claim that you stated in your topic sentence. All right, and so I want you to provide at least 2 pieces of evidence per body paragraph, so that we'll have at least a couple of pieces of evidence that show that the claim that you're making is true. Okay, the whole point here is we're trying to prove to the reader that what you're claiming is actually true, that it actually went down that way. All right, so you will have your 2 pieces of evidence in your body paragraph. You also want to have some analysis of that evidence. Sometimes the evidence will be straightforward and the reader will get it right off the bat, but sometimes you have to really show the reader how the evidence proves the claim that you were making in the topic sentence. Okay, you got to tie it together for them and really just kind of think of it as you're holding the reader's hand as you walk them through that body paragraph, and you're trying to prove this point to them. You're showing them some evidence, and then you're showing them how that evidence proves your point. That's your analysis. Okay, in addition, you may have some historical background in that paragraph if it's needed. If it's not, then you don't have to include it. But sometimes you got to let the reader know a little bit of background, what was going on at that time in relation to that point that you're making in the topic sentence, right? They may need to know a little bit more in order to understand and really be convinced that your point is true. All right, and so after you have all of that, you will end each body paragraph with a concluding sentence. And the concluding sentence is basically just reaffirming the point that you made in your body paragraph. And then also you can include a transition to the next paragraph. I sometimes will include my transition in the topic sentence, going from one paragraph to another, but you can also include it in the concluding sentence. It's up to you. All right, so that's your structure for all the body paragraphs in your paper. All right, so just so if you're not familiar, the paper's structure includes an introduction, which introduces the topic to the reader, and then it includes a number of different body paragraphs that are all aimed at proving different points that ultimately prove your overall thesis. Right, and your thesis has your assertion and your 3 reasons being your 3 main claims, same thing. And then you'll have your conclusion, which ultimately reaffirms all the points that you made. I mean, not everything, but you're just kind of summarizing the main points that you've made in your paper, and then maybe stating the significance of your overall thesis. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at an example of a body paragraph so you could actually see what I'm talking about. This paper here was written by me a long time ago when I was a student, so it's not perfect, but it'll give us an idea of the structure that I'm talking about. So before I start reading the paragraph, let me just give you a little bit of background on what this paper is on so that you kind of understand the topic. Right? I got to give you a little historical background, right? So this paper is basically talking about how the traditional religions of the Nahua people and people who lived in the Andes, right? So these are Native American peoples who lived in central Mexico and in the Andes and areas like Peru and Bolivia. The paper is about how these people continued to practice their traditional religions during a time when Spanish clergy were trying to uproot those traditions. So they continued to practice in private. That's what the paper is trying to prove to the reader. Okay, so right now we're going to start with one of my body paragraphs that is trying to prove a specific claim, a subclaim to the reader. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what that claim is. All right, so topic sentence. In central Mexico, the small towns and villages that were located away from the sphere of Spanish authority acted as havens of traditional religion. Okay, so that's my claim. Right? I'm stating it out there like it sounds like it's a fact, right? But really, it's a claim that I have to prove by showing you evidence. All right, and so I'm just saying that these little towns and villages that are far away from where the majority of the Spanish population is, that's where you see traditional religions still being practiced. So that's my claim. I have to prove that to my reader now. All right, so let's go ahead and start. After the topic sentence, I go in, I'm going to introduce some evidence, all right? So in the mid-16th century, Las Casas, this is a priest, Las Casas recognized that the periphery would remain a stronghold of traditional religions if the indigenous people were not won over in their hearts. So here's a piece of evidence showing that a priest from that time period is saying that, yeah, they're going to practice their traditional religions on the outskirts, in the periphery, unless we really convert them to Catholicism. Okay, so that's one of my pieces of evidence proving my topic sentence. Let's go on. Although the Nahuas were able to practice their traditional rituals more freely in the periphery, they still needed to keep their devotion hidden from the secular and regular clergy who were assigned to their area. During the extirpation campaigns, these are just campaigns to uproot traditional religion. During the extirpation campaigns of central Mexico in the early 17th century, Spanish secular clergy acknowledged that many practitioners of traditional religion would return to their practices even after being reprimanded, right? After being punished. Okay, so I'm still making my point here. So giving you some more, that was more like historical background, right? So now let's get to the point, another piece of evidence. Ruiz de Alarcón, this is another Spanish clergy member from that time. Ruiz de Alarcón cited the example of a person named Agustín Jacobo, an indigenous man from the district of Hoapan in central Mexico. After finding that Jacobo had been practicing traditional incantations in an effort to gain supernatural aid for his hunting abilities, Ruiz de Alarcón ordered him to cease immediately, and he explained to Jacobo that such practices were evil as they entailed a pact with the devil. But despite that chastisement of this ecclesiastical judge, Jacobo eventually resumed the ritual after moving, and I'm putting this in quotation marks, away from populated places, meaning that he continued to practice his traditional religion away from the centers where the Spanish were, in the periphery, in those small villages that I was saying. So that's basically my claim that I was making in my topic sentence. And so I kind of built up, I gave you a little bit of background on what was going on. People were practicing even though they were punished. And then I give you an example of a specific person. This is evidence. I'm giving you evidence showing you that a specific person actually did go away from populated places and continue to practice his religion. Now, you may also notice that I put it in quotation marks because I used a direct quote from the text. Now, when do you use a direct quote from the text? This is another point I want to make to you guys. Okay, use direct quotes when they have an impact. Only when they have an impact. There's no point in doing a direct quote if you could simply just paraphrase it yourself, put it in your own words if you're just trying to explain something. Something I always tell students is you don't want to let the quote speak for you. Say you're trying to relate an author's theory or something like that. Paraphrase it into your own words, right? Paraphrasing it means just putting it into your own words. The only time you really want to quote it directly is when you want it to have an impact on your reader, to really show them, hey, look at the evidence, this is true. Okay, and that's what I did here. All right, so I quoted from the text because it shows you specifically that he was practicing his religion away from populated places, and that's my whole point in this paragraph, is to try to prove that, and that's why I made that quote. Okay. All right, so that's when you quote. All right, let's continue. We'll finish off this paragraph. All right, so Ruiz de Alarcón related that it was common to find the continued practice of indigenous religions in, and I'm doing it again, I'm giving you a direct quote, hills and deserts remote from the main towns. So it's common that people are still practicing their religions during this time, away from the populated areas in the hills and in the deserts. Okay, so again, it has an impact. It's showing you that what I was arguing in my topic sentence is true. All right, so that was it. I gave you evidence. I gave you a little historical background, all towards proving my point that I made in my topic sentence. See how it's organized all around proving one main point. All right, each body paragraph is organized like that. Let's finish it off with the concluding sentence. All right, the distance between rural villages and the main centers of Spanish population allowed Nahuas, these are the native people of central Mexico, to maintain some of their religious traditions. All right, it's just reaffirming the point that I made in that body paragraph. Okay, so that is an example of how to structure your body paragraphs. You'll have multiple body paragraphs in your paper, and they should all follow a structure similar to that. Okay. Okay, next I want to talk a little bit about citation. When do you cite? When do you need to cite your sources? Well, I give you 3 different times when you need to cite. So always cite when, and I put this all in uppercase letters because I want you to really pay attention to this. Always cite when using a direct quote, obviously, right? And that's when most people do make their citations, is when they do a direct quote. And don't forget to use those quotation marks. That happens. I see many people quoting, but they forget to put the quotation marks. They put one quotation marks and not the other, so always put those quotation marks. That's definitely one time when you're going to be citing your sources. But that's not the only time to cite your sources. All right, there's a couple of other instances. All right, so another time where you would cite your sources is if you're paraphrasing any information or ideas from that source. Okay, meaning that, say, there's a lot of information in the source and you want to put it into your own words rather than use a direct quote, which I encourage. I think you should do a lot more paraphrasing than quoting. I don't really care for papers that have a lot of quotations because it's kind of like letting them speak for you. So put it in your own words. Show me that you understand and comprehend what you're writing about. So paraphrase it, put it in your own words. Now, anytime you paraphrase, you have to cite where you got that information from. All right, so that I could look back in your source and say, oh, okay, they got it from this page. So very important to cite that information anytime you put something into your own words. Okay. And lastly, when you're summarizing any information or ideas from a source, you have to cite it as well. So say you read 2 or 3 pages and you want to just summarize all that into a couple of sentences. And that's fine, you should do that, but you have to cite what pages you got that from. So basically any ideas, any information that you get from a source, you have to cite where you got it from. Otherwise, you're claiming responsibility for that information or those ideas, and that is considered plagiarism, right? And so you cannot do that. And so these are the 3 times when you cite information. Okay, and so keep in mind, when it's your idea, it's something that you're coming up with yourself, like say your topic sentence, that's going to be your claim, you don't have to cite that. All right, so I shouldn't see citations in the topic sentences because that's the claim that you're making. Anytime that you're analyzing evidence and showing how it proves your point, that's you. That's your ideas. You don't have to cite that either. Okay, so anytime it's your ideas or your own thinking, your own points, you don't have to cite it. But if you get it from somewhere else, any information, doesn't even matter if it doesn't matter if you're directly quoting it or not. Any information you have to cite where you got it from. Okay. All right, and so about quotes, a little bit more about direct quotations. I want you to always introduce your quote. Don't just insert your quotes as a standalone sentence. This is comments that I make quite a bit, right? Because a lot of times people will just put a quote in without saying anything about it. It's just there as its own sentence. You want to let the reader know, what is this quote? What's the point of this quote? In what context was the quote made? Right? Who is saying the quote? Those are all ways to introduce the quote to your reader. Okay. So before we stop with citation, let's go ahead and go back to this example here, and I'll show you what the citation looks like. Okay, so in this sentence right here, I got this from a book, right? It wasn't my own thoughts. I actually, got it from a book, and so I have to cite it. And I put it in my own words. There's no direct quotation in this sentence, right? But I got the information from a source, so I got to cite it. So here is where and how to do a citation in MLA format. Okay, so at the end of the sentence, right, I did a space, and then you have your parentheses, and then after the parenthesis, you just put the author's last name. In this case, it's Las Casas. And then after the last name, you do another space, and then you put the page number or page numbers where you got that information from. This is the in-text citation in MLA format. And then you finish that off with a end parenthesis, and then your period comes after the citation. Okay? After. It's important. You know, sometimes people will put the period before. And so that's it. That's your citation, right? That's the format for in-text citation. You know, of course, there's different format for your bibliography or works cited page, but this is what it looks like inside of the text. Okay, so last name, space, page number, page numbers. All right, all within parentheses, period at the end. All right, and that is pretty much it. Here's another example of it here. Okay. All right, and the last thing I want to talk about is the conclusion. All right, this is the last paragraph of your paper. And so in the conclusion, you're basically just reaffirming the main points that you made in your body paragraphs, just showing the reader how you proved the argument that you had introduced in your introduction. And then you also may want to say what the significance of your thesis is, right? Why should they care about it? You know, why should the readers be interested in you proving this point in the first place, right? So why is it important to them? Okay, so that pretty much brings us to the end of this. If you have any questions about the writing process or the writing format, just go ahead and email me and I will get back to you.